A skill with the API Fulfillment type uses Infor APIs to fulfill a user request or answer questions with variable answers. This is the most technical of the fulfillment types. In this example, I'll show you how to build a skill that will return a list of the user's Ming.le Groups. On the Coleman Skills page, we start by clicking the Add Skill icon above the data grid. This will send us to the Add Skill flow. We can see each step of the process in the stepper bar at the top of the screen. The first step is defining basic skill information. We'll add a skill ID. The ID is a unique identifier for your skill. Let's call this skill List My Groups. The skill name is a common name for your skill. For the description, we'll say, list the Ming.le Groups of which the user is a member. Next, we select the language. Currently, Coleman Digital Assistant only supports US English. The next screen is Fulfillment. Our selection here decides what kind of skill we're making. This page selects the API Fulfillment type by default. Since we're trying to return Ming.le Groups, we'll select the Ming.le API suite and select Ming.le as the product. We'll use the API Lookup overlay to find an API that does what we want. This lookup contains all the APIs for the suite and product we selected. We can run a search for groups, and this first API is what we're looking for. Let's select it. On the Fulfillment tab, we can see all the API information has been filled out for us automatically. Any path or query string parameters, or request or response bodies will be displayed here. This API has one parameter, userGUID, that needs to be populated to send the API request. We'll see how to fill it on the Requirements tab. Requirements are pieces of information that Coleman needs from the user in order to execute the skill. In this example, the only information we need is the userGUID parameter shown here, so that we know which users' groups to look for. We don't expect the user to know their unique userGUID, but thankfully, we don't need to ask. We can fill this parameter using the user context. Once we select user context, we can find social userGUID in the drop-down menu. Now the correct, unique userGUID will be included in the API request for any user who invokes the skill. Next, we'll define some utterances. Utterances are the phrases that the user can say to start the skill. In this situation, utterances should include different ways to ask the question, what are my Ming.le Groups? You need at least one for your skill to work, but for best results, you should try for 15. There are many different ways to say the same thing. Now we'll move on to response. Response is where we will choose what information we want from the API response and determine how Coleman presents that information to the user. We wanted to get a list of Ming.le Groups the user is a member of. Let's call this variable My Groups. Now we'll use the JSON path builder to select what information we want returned to us. This information comes from the response body displayed here. The information we want is group name, so we select that, and we can see the JSON path has been built automatically for us. There's one small change we need to make though. I know a little bit about JSON paths, and I know that this 0 means only the first group in the list will be returned. We want a complete list, so let's change the 0 to an asterisk to return all group names. Now our response variable is ready to return a list of group names as an array of strings. Let's define our response conditions. If the user is not a member of any Ming.le Groups, we'll let them know. If the user is a member of at least one group, we'll list them. To do this, we'll format the response variable using the concatenate strings function. I access the list of functions by typing a $, and then I select the function I want. Then I reference the response variable My Groups in curly braces. When Coleman gives this response, the groups will be listed and separated by commas. Our final step is to review the summary of the skill we just made. We can see the details in one place in the text view, and we can check out the flow view to see a visual representation of the conversation flow. When we're happy, we can hit save. The new skill is created in draft state. In this state, it can't be used yet. To learn about next steps, watch the course about building and testing a skill.